Welcome to another episode of Real Life Fiction. I'm Matt James with Conundrum Publishing, international best-selling author of the Jack Riley Adventures series. And today I'll be talking to author Philip Tomasso. Phil, thanks for coming on the show. How you doing?
Wonderful. I'm having a great day. How about you?
Good. Doing well, doing well. We're as we are recording, South Florida is supposed to be getting a storm of some kind. I don't even know if it's a hurricane. It might just be a tropical storm. I don't really pay attention to it down here as I probably should. I'm just kind of like, it's Florida. It's
Are you by the water? Are you by the ocean on either side?
we are about 20-minute drive, so however long that is mile wise, about a 20-minute drive from the ocean on East Coast from the Atlantic.
Gotcha.
But where I live, we're like on the western side of, so like Palm Beach County, on the
Yep.
western side of Palm Beach County. So like I'm in Wellington, and Wellington butts up against Belle Glade and like the sugar farms and like all of like the swampy areas.
Yeah.
So when storms come in from the west, we get shellacked because they pick up all that moisture and just dump it on you.
Yeah.
Coming in from the east, it's just kind of a crapshoot. I mean, it is. There's really nothing. There's nothing you can do about it. You just have to kind of sit and wait.
Yeah.
So right now, about an hour north of us is supposed to get hit semi hard, and then we'll see what that dumps on us. I don't know. It's Florida.
Well,
I,
I wore I just found
yeah,
out you're a Lions fan, but I wore
yeah,
my Tua shirt because I am a Dolphins fan living in Bills territory. So a
yeah.
little bit dangerous in my area, but I
Yeah,
figured for a Florida podcast, I would
yeah.
jump.
Yeah, no, I like. Don't get me wrong. Like, I grew up. Uh, I don't want to say grew up supporting the Dolphins, but I grew up like watching them, and I grew up like, wow, football. Because they're the local team. So I mean, and I grew up. I've been here my whole life. My brother and I are Floridians. The rest of my family was born in suburban Detroit. So I grew up a Lions fan. Unfortunately, one thing I can't tell you about a Lions fan is the person is one of the more trustworthy, dedicated people on earth, because we are still Lions fans
I mean, I
after all
never
that
heard
pain.
anybody say that before about
Yeah,
I don't know any Lions fans until now, so
yeah.
I
They're
feel
like,
honored.
wow, you must be dedicated in all sorts of facets of your life if you're a dedicated Lions fan. I'm like, yeah, for better or for worse. But I'm
Yep.
also a Red Wings fan, so I mean, we had 20 years of you know A+ success. So
Sure.
I'm not a big basketball fan, so I'm not a big Pistons fan by any means. And Tigers are. I grew up a Tigers fan, but it's kind of the same thing. It's kind of like they've had a little more success, but uh,
A
same
little.
thing. They're usually just kind of disheartening and
I
heartbreaking.
get it.
But
I get it.
yeah, but so for those that don't know, don't know you, just kind of tell us a little bit about yourself, Phil.
All right. Well, I started writing. I grew up with a reading disability, and it wasn't until I was in seventh grade that I actually read my first novel cover to cover. It was S.E. Hinton's The Outsiders.
Oh yeah.
She was 16 years old when she wrote that, and that made me. I became an avid reader because of her. But as a storyteller, a natural storyteller, I realized if she could inspire me to read, maybe I could write stories that would inspire other reluctant readers to read. So at 14, I started writing short stories. And in the course of a long time, I sold close to 600 short stories um, until I sold my first novel, Mind Play, in the year 2000. So
Oh
I
wow.
went from reading disability to avid reader. I read roughly 100 books a year to a prolific writer. And here
Wow.
it's 2022, and my 30th book just came out, and I couldn't be happier.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, I'm actually think I'm approaching 30 as well, if I'm not mistaken. It's It's hard to keep track. I don't want to sound like a goober, but it's like I'm like because people ask, they're like, "Oh, how many books have you written?" And because like I'll tell them, "Oh, I'm an author. You know, I write this." They're like, "Oh, what do you do?" And I'm like, I'll tell them about like my Jack Riley series or something. They're like, "Oh, how many books?" I'm like, "Oh, I just released the 4th book." "Oh, cool, cool. What else?" I'm like, "There's like 25 others." They're like, "Whoa!" I'm like, "Yeah." I just
if I didn't just hit the 30th, because that's a that's a big
yeah,
number.
yeah,
I don't know that I would know just randomly off the top of my head. So
yeah,
because this
yeah.
is 30, I'm like, oh, 30, I got that.
Yeah, yeah, no, I get it. Yeah, and I don't do a lot of like shorts. So I mean, so for me, it's like I've written a few like novellas and novelettes and stuff, but mostly everything I write is either I guess a short novel or just a typical novel. So
Well, and
I
that's kind of funny because I would love to be able to write more short stories because there's still
mhm,
a big market for that.
sure,
I I can't. It's such a different writing style that once I
yeah.
got into novel writing, going back and writing short stories, that's a whole different talent, and I don't possess it anymore. I had it, I lost
Yeah.
it. I'd love to get it back.
Yeah, because you get into like writing your traditional novel style, whatever genre it ends up being. You get so heavily into like character development, and
Yes,
that's a big part. That's a lot of your word count. And when you're just writing a short, especially in like the action adventure genre that I write in, I mean, 5 chapters of action adventure, it's like start to finish, boom, done, and you're like, but there's so much more.
right,
It's like there's so
right.
much more I need to tell and add in this. So then it ends up just I
Being a
get it. I get it. Like I have a it's technically, I guess word count wise, it's technically a novelette that Nick and I are releasing in December for the Zarkane series we're doing. And I've promoted it before, but it's called Empire Lost. And the idea behind that was in Anubis Plague, in the first book of this series, our heroine Zara is down in the Amazon searching for the lost city of Z, and she works for the British Museum, and she's a badass, and so she's down there doing her thing. But the idea behind it was, I want this massive, massive, massive opening number, Indiana Jones style, where it's 15 minutes of the movie, but it has nothing to do with the story.
yeah,
It's like at the
yeah.
beginning of Raiders, the only thing that matters is Indy and Belloc, is their relationship. You never see the Golden Fertility Idol again. You never like that's
Right,
it. It's
right,
just, oh, these two guys know each other, and this
right.
is obviously now the villain. But that's it. There's nothing. We never hear about it again. So
And
except when
probably
Mark,
one of the
except
most
when yeah.
exciting openings of a movie.
Oh, yeah, no, it's like one of the, it's like film wise, it's like got to be a top 2 or 3 opening number. I mean, it's
Absolutely.
amazing. It's iconic.
Yes.
So I'm like, I want that. I want to write this big, massive opening number. And Nick's like, do it. Sounds amazing. Well, it ended up being like a 12,000 word prologue. So it was like a 5 chapter prologue. And I told him that. And he's like, Matt, he's just like, you open the book and it says prologue, and then there's chapter numbers in your prologue. He goes, "What the heck?" I'm like, "You told me to make it big." All right, he's like, "All right, we'll figure something out." So that was accidentally now is going to be a novelette instead of a prologue. So
Oh,
it wasn't written purposefully as an introduction novelette. It was actually a prologue that we pulled from the book and then expanded. So it was kind of like, oops. But that's really the only short I've written in years, and it was not supposed to be.
it sounds intriguing.
Yeah, no.
It does.
So if you want to write a short story, I suggest writing a massive prologue.
Mhm.
and, and then,
I'm keeping that right here.
yeah, right, yeah, no. But so writing wise, like I know you, and I know you well enough. You're definitely not shy as far as screw it, I'm going to write a story that sounds cool. You're not as boxed in with like genre specific writing. You like to write whatever you want to write.
Whatever story hits me,
Hmm.
um, that's the one I write. I've got books in horror, science fiction, mystery, crime thrillers. I wrote a romance novel, Before the Sun Sets, which is
Mhm.
a heartbreaking romance novel. I've written young adult. I wrote about a 12-year-old boy who contracts meningitis and becomes deaf. Sounds of Silence. Um, I've written just about every genre there is, and now nonfiction with my latest book, my
Mhm.
memoirs, which is just ridiculous to hear me say that I wrote memoirs. But yeah, whatever story hits me, inspires me, I just write it. That's what I don't want to be pigeonholed into one specific
Yeah.
style.
Yeah, no, and more power to you. I've dabbled. I would probably say about 80% of what I've put out is action adventure of some. I mean, action adventure is very broad, but it's that set style. And for me, I mean, I also I hate sounding like this. It really makes me sound like an ass, but it's also where the money is for me. It's where it's where what my readers buy. It's like I've tried science fiction horror. Like I wrote a book called Sub Zero. Did well. It did well, and immediately. But before that, I wrote Dark Island, which is more my normal action adventure style, and it sold better. And then I followed up Sub Zero with the first Jack Riley book, and it blew up. And I'm
Yeah,
like, okay. And then I've done Zarkane, which is more my style, and it's selling well. So I'm like, I'll like diverge and try something different, and then get that itch again to go back into action adventure. And then when I write action adventure, I get that like I told you so from the readers. And so I'm fine with, like, I'm okay with, if that's what people want to call me, as an action adventure author. I'm fine with that, because that's also just what I enjoy writing the most. So why not?
I've read enough of your action adventure to know that you definitely have a knack for it. And
Thank you.
the Jack Riley series alone is probably up in my top favorite action adventure books, and I read a lot of action adventure. So
Sure. Thank you. I appreciate that. I really do.
yeah, yeah, and
I really do. Yeah, no.
it's well worth it.
Thank you.
Do what's
Yeah.
do what's making you happy, and do what's
Yeah.
making you money.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I was probably more comfortable jumping around genre wise. I will call it, in my younger author years, because it was more, why not? Who cares? Let's just do it. But now, with it being more of a business philosophy, the last couple of years, I've really had to kind of like sit back and really like decide, like actually verbally talk about it with my wife and go, okay, this is what's working, this isn't what's working. But that's also why I'm kind of bringing in other series, is because I can do a little bit more like serious stuff within the same genre.
Yeah,
And that's why, like, Zara exists. Is Zara is a little rougher around the edges. She's a little grittier. So is the story plot, even the language in the book's a little rougher. The content's a little rougher. But that's a lot of stories that I've been itching to write that just don't work with Jack.
perfect. I mean, it's
But
a perfect outlet.
yeah, it is. No, it is. It absolutely is. And I was very happy being able to do it. And I have another thriller series that I'm starting after I finish the fifth Jack Riley book. I have a brand new series that is. I mean, I've been hinting at it, but it's not as over the top as like John Wick, but it's essentially if the John Wick movies were made with Ryan Reynolds.
Oh, I like that. I
So,
can see
so
where that could be fun.
yeah, so and that's the thing, is I think it's gonna be fun as hell to write. I
Yeah,
think it's gonna be so fun to write. So like I just have that thinking of, the comedic just outlet and timing that guy has, and he doesn't even try,
right,
because that's just Ryan.
right.
But it's going to be that like action thriller that's got a lot of those like brutal bar fight scenes, that has
Yeah,
like a lot of those like environmental like brawls where he's just like throwing trash cans and like just like like drowning a guy in a toilet, like like those but it's Guy, it's blue shirt Guy, it's it's the classic Ryan Reynolds, that wit that he has, but he can flip it off and go nuts if he needs to, because that's just his background, that's the character. And I'm thinking about that, going, man, I really want to write this, and I'm like, oh.
I love it. I absolutely love it.
Yeah, and then of course I pitch the idea to Nick, because I obviously value his opinion, being my partner and stuff, and my writing partner as well. And he's just like, you have to write that. I'm like, huh, all right. So
Yeah.
that put back a different project that I wanted to write, but I didn't have as much like, wow, I think this is going to be great kind of feeling behind it. So yeah, but again, same genre, just
Yep.
roundabout genre. Just how willing am I to go bigger? And I think that's going to be pretty big. But
I think so. I think
yeah.
so. I like it.
Yeah, no. So you just released your memoir, so or at least the first in a line of what I hope is going to be more nonfiction stuff from you,
Thank you.
because I know it's doing well, and I know you're really proud of it, and especially knowing your background being a 911 dispatcher, it's obviously about that. And so I'd like to focus on that book a little bit, because between being a 911 dispatcher, yep, nothing good happens after midnight.
There it is.
And I know you being a New Yorker with 9/11, and just there's more going on in your head when it comes to this kind of stuff than like if I were to sit and write it, because I was in high school when something like 9/11 hit, but I wasn't.
Making me old.
Well, yeah, but I wasn't working through it. Especially, I wasn't working in the field that you have a lot of experience in. So it was like, what made you decide to? Because I'm sure this is something that's been on the back burner for you for a while, that you've been thinking about for
13 years. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of one of those things where, what made you decide to finally sit down and write this puppy?
Okay. This is a little. I hope this isn't too long or boring.
No, go ahead. Absolutely.
So I had gotten to a point recently where I decided that I thought I am going to take a step back from writing. I'm not going to write anything else. So Temple of Shadow, released by Severed Press last, I guess, November, was probably going to be my last book, and I wasn't going to do anything. When I started at 911 in 2009, I, as a writer, wrote down calls that I took or dispatches that I was part of, because they were fascinating. And I always said, well, one day when I retire, I'm going to write this 911 book. So then I decided, well, if I'm done writing, or if I'm done writing fiction, maybe it's time to write this 911 book. Now, a lot of people were worried that I was doing something more of an expose about behind the scenes of 911, talking about management or upper management, or and while that is still a potential book when I do retire, because I have a pension at stake, that wasn't the purpose of this book. This book, what I realized as I started writing it was, so I came from the corporate world. I worked as a paralegal in employment law for Eastman Kodak Company for a long time. And I was with Kodak for almost 20 years. And then I started at 911 after being laid off from Kodak, and it was a culture shock. And I was doing something completely different that I'd never done before. And I realized that, and well, I guess the key thing is too, in 2008, my ex-wife and I had separated. We had 3 kids. So my life was towards rock bottom.
Sure.
I was unemployed, separated, divorced, 3 kids. Then I got the job at 911, and I'm working crazy hours, 8 to 16-hour shifts, days, 4 to midnights, midnight to 8. I'm all over the place. So this book became about balance. In the 13 years since I've been there, I've been in a constant search for balance. So I talk a little bit about Kodak. I talk about my family, and I splice it all together with the things I've done and the things I've learned working at 911 that have impacted my life. There's a ton of humorous stories in this book. I mean,
yeah, I'd imagine. I mean,
yes,
yeah,
I
they're
don't want
not
to
they're
make it
not all gloom and grit, and
exactly.
there's yeah,
So there's some,
sure,
and there's some because that's the job. 9 or maybe 20 out of 21 calls are not the emergency you would think from watching like a 911 show.
sure.
It is the hey, it's 3 o'clock in the morning. There's a car parked on the wrong side of the street. Yeah, go to bed. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
yeah.
What are you calling for? There's a dog in the park without a leash on it. Okay, is he attacking you? You're all right, right? Okay.
Yeah. There is
But
such
then
thing as non-emergency police people.
it,
I'm letting you know that. It's not as easy to remember as 911, but because it's an actual phone number,
right.
but there is such thing as non-emergency police, and they're still pretty quick. So it's
Yeah,
like
exactly. But they
you don't
call
have to,
911. I've had people
yeah.
call 911 and say, "Look, I had to leave a hockey game early. Any way you could tell me the score?" No kidding.
What?
Yes,
Oh
no
my
kidding.
gosh.
That's not in the book. I should have put that. That's a good one. But then there's the heartbreaking stories.
Volume two. Volume two.
Yeah, volume. Well, there will be a volume
Yeah,
two.
I was about to say that better be in volume two. That's
Um,
ridiculous. It's great.
yeah. Well, and so you take a string of these calls, and then the next call is the 80-year-old woman who found her husband face down on the floor in the kitchen, and he's not breathing. And you got to help her flip him over and give her CPR instructions, and she's 80 years old, and how is she going to do this until responders get there? And then you go home knowing that this man passed away, and there's nothing you could do to help, and she did all she could to help him, and people are like, "Oh, how was work?" And you just want to go outside and cut the lawn.
Hmm.
Just I don't want to be around people.
Yeah.
So that's what this book is. How do I balance that with my kids as a divorced dad, with friends, with working midnights, and then constantly trying to figure out when am I going to get some sleep and not
Yep.
miss my kids' football game? And
Yeah.
it was an emotional, probably one of the rawest, most open, honest books I've ever written. It exposes a lot of me that I usually do keep private. I'm not a private person, but a lot of things I kept private came out in this book. So the fact that it's selling as good as it is a week and a half into its release is it's gratifying, and it's humbling. It's humbling.
Yeah, no, and I mean, I'm very happy to hear that because there's something to whether it's fiction or not. There's because just coming from a fiction author's viewpoint, whenever you can interject yourself into your character,
Yeah.
it makes a huge difference with your reader, and that's not me going, "Ooh, there's a lot of me and Jack Riley and it sells well." No, I've actually had people reach out to me and go, "I can tell that this is actually real." And I'm like, "Yeah, like my grandmother moved to the US or moved to the US just before the Nazis invaded Poland." And and that's Jack's grandmother. Jack's grandmother was there, but her middle name in Agatha Catherine Stremka is Jack's grandmother. My grandmother was Virginia Catherine Stremka, and
Nice.
so it's like there's purposeful information in all my books. A lot of it's probably more on the humorous side because it's just like quirks of mine that I want to interject into the character. But at the same time, there's also real like stuff, like a lot of the emotion, like in my Frank Moon series, a lot of the emotion that Frank has during a monster apocalypse where he's like broken just because he can't handle the stress and he can't handle what's happening. That was me in that character going, how am I going to react? And with that entire series being first person present, I am Frank. The writer is Frank. In this case, I'm the writer. So it's like I can't write in this perspective saying, I do this, me, like it's my story. I can't write in that unless I am just the character. So, you know, like that's right. Frank's a detective with the NYPD. He's a cop, but he's a normal dude. He's not a military guy. He's not an ex-SEAL. He's not this. He's not that. He's not a scientist. He's not an expert. He's just a guy. And I'm like, well, if I'm going to be this guy, then I need the character to be a guy, and he's a guy. And how would I react? Well, this is how Frank's going to react. And I've had a lot of people contact me, and they're like, this just it reads differently. It reads from a real person's perspective. And I'm like, I thank you, because I've
Right.
that was the point. I went,
Right.
you know, and I mean, memoir is a completely different thing, because that's
Well,
your life story, you know.
I get what you're saying, because in all of my fiction books, there's me, and not necessarily just the main character, but a little bit of me in every character.
Yeah.
The good, the bad, the minor characters, the way they react to stuff is a lot of me. So
Yeah.
I get exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, and that's why, like, a lot of my characters, you know, have a little snark in them, and it's because that's how I would react. I'd be like, you know, I'm like, shrug. I don't know. I'm like, what do you want from me? I'm like, somebody asks one of my characters a question, he doesn't know the answer. He's not going to be an expert in botany if he's an ex-Delta operator. So it's like his reaction is going to be like, why the hell are you asking me? It's like, you know, it's like, I'm like, that's how I would react. I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, I'm Matt. I'm like, why are you asking me all these weird scientific questions? I'm like, what the hell am I supposed to know? You know?
I like that. That's what I like that. You don't have the answer.
No.
What are you asking for? I get it.
Yeah, and I interject that into my stories. Like there'll be something like super scientific, and there's like an explanation and whatever. And as the writer, as the narrator, I'm supposed to give the reader all the answers, right?
Right.
I don't, and I don't care. I'm like, and I have like because I write from the character's perspective, but I write from the narrator's chair as well. So it's like, if Jack doesn't know the answer to something, or if Zara doesn't know the answer to something, who am I as the narrator to step in or overstep and then diminish any kind of credibility that the character has?
Right.
And that's not a proper way to write third-person fiction, because you're supposed to know everything, because you're the narrator, you're the Morgan Freeman, you're God, you're supposed to know all. Well, Jack doesn't know everything, Zara doesn't know everything, so it's like, yep. I don't feel like I should know everything. You know, I know what I'm writing, but but as far as the story is concerned, I think it's better.
The answer has to come out a different way.
Yeah.
Or
the answer just doesn't have to come out.
Or the answer doesn't have to come out, right?
Yeah. It's a disease. It's a zombie apocalypse. It's a whatever. Well, how is it caused? Who cares? Right. It's like, yeah, it's like, so now I need to introduce what? A hematologist and a different, like, how would you want me to relay this message without it sounding like a Wikipedia page?
Right.
And completely kill the flow of the story. It's like, just accept it and move on. And luckily, what I have found is most readers are more than willing to accept it and move on.
Oh, yeah.
You know, because they're there for the story, you know, they're there for the characters, and they're there, you know, and so I've done like that kind of writing style in all my books, just because I don't have all the answers. So I'm not going to pretend to pull one over the reader's eyes and give them all the answers.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and that's me, but that's me putting myself in all of my novels, in all of my books, because it's coming from my perspective as the writer.
I guarantee you, readers like that and information dumps are boring.
Yeah. Like
information dumps are boring.
Yeah. Like I grew up playing Rainbow Six, right? Great video games. Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six. Well, I wasn't an avid reader back then. So all of a sudden I realized Rainbow Six is a book. Well, if the video game was as good as it was, which it was, like, it's a legendary, the original Rainbow Six games, I'm like, the book should be great, right? I'm like, this will be fun. So I went to this was before, or maybe right when like a Barnes & Noble opened around here, but I went to my local bookstore that I always bought stuff from, and found Tom Clancy. I'm like, cool, Tom Clancy. Rainbow Six was 847 pages.
Yeah, it's a big one.
Paperback. So it was like a brick.
Yeah.
It's huge.
I read it.
The first 9 pages is just military jargon. And I'm like, what the hell is this book about? Like, I don't know, like, what's the story? Like, I I was sitting there flipping through the first few pages in the bookstore going, it feels like a history novel. It doesn't feel like, or a history book. It doesn't feel like a what I was going to assume would be an action thriller. And I'm sure it was, but I never read it because
you never read it?
No, I never read it.
It's still good. It's good. You got to get Clancy is a wordy son of a bitch.
Yeah,
he is, and he's
not my cup of tea with my attention span and my lack of just time in general. I get it. I get it. It's still worth reading. It's all of his books. He's still introducing new characters that all end in OV throughout the whole book. There's 3,000 characters all with the same sounding last name. That he introduces from page 1 till the last page. But the guy can tell a story. Oh yeah, no, and that's like a lot of your your Michael Crichtons of the world, your Stephen Kings of the world, your Dean Koontz. I mean, all your big guys. Your Steve Barrys. They are who they are for a very, very specific reason. They're masters at their craft. I mean, they get it. That's who we all want to grow up to be.
Right.
But I grew up in the keep the pace at as close to 100% as possible, 100 miles an hour as possible.
James Patterson's expert at that.
Yeah.
No detail, no description. It's just 1.5 page chapters of moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah. I write more prototypical chapter length. I'm still, I clock in a little longer, but I write in scenes. So for me, if the scene is over, it's over. If it's not, I just keep going because for me, it's like the methodology and thought. Like Nick has a specific way of doing things where he likes the Patterson model, short chapters, boom, 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 keep going. Right. My philosophy has always been if you end it, the reader is more apt to put it down. So because it's a break. So for me as a writer, I would rather the scene just make the reader sweat. And then them put it down exhausted going, oh man, what a ride. That's great. Versus put it down, go to the bathroom, get a drink, do this. 3 weeks later, pick it back up.
It's a good way of looking at it. I understand what you're saying.
The methodology.
But Nick, with Nick, when I'm reading a book with short chapters, I will go, oh, there's only 2 pages in this next chapter. I'll read one more.
Yeah, exactly. Same thing.
I'll read one more.
Same thing. I was the same way. I was the same way as a reader. Same way as a reader. I grew up reading Matthew Riley. So Matthew Riley, he's even wonkier. And I don't know if people really understand his. I mean, I've never talked to him, but as a writer, this is just my thought. He doesn't have chapter numbers.
Right.
People have never realized that.
I've got them all on my bookshelf.
I have most, and I'm like. People don't understand is you go through the entire Jack West Jr. series, there's not a single chapter number. And the Madman has maps, which is ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean, he's awesome. Don't get me
wrong. I love maps.
Yeah. I mean, that's where Jack Riley gets his name from is Jack West, Matthew Riley. So, I mean, it's.
I knew that. That.
Oh, yeah, from the get-go. I'm writing this character and I spin and look at my because I always want to introduce specific names usually. And I'm like, I want a white bread, all American first name, something easy to remember, something that's just so Jack, why not? And I'm like, oh, Jack West. And then Matthew Riley. Well, my daughter's name is Riley, spelled more of the first name Riley, Riley. And I'm like, oh, Jack Riley. And I'm like, Matthew Riley, Jack West. I'm like, all right, let's do it. So the last name resonated with me on different levels. And then Jack just was a name that I liked. And then I realized, I'm like, Jack Riley, Matthew. I'm like, oh, that'd be a great conversation piece too. And it's a good, it's a good name. So why not? It's a strong name. So
absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. No, but yeah, as far as the methodology with writing and stuff, it's do you put a lot of effort into that with your stuff? Do you have a set, this is what I believe, so this is what I'm going to write, or is it just case by case?
That's a good question.
Just as far as like the setup, because
Yeah.
it's obviously a very broad question, but it's like I have a very specific style in like that, and very like this is how I go about it. So it's different. Nick has told me so. He goes, man, you don't like to let go of a scene unless you're ready to let go of it. And I said, I know, but that's I guess the director in me. That's
I
like,
was going to say
yeah,
it's like a movie. Okay.
exactly.
Okay. Cut.
Yeah,
But I get that. Yeah.
yeah.
I guess I'm like you. I do tend to finish a scene unless it's got a perfect cliffhanger where
Sure.
I can start a new chapter, picking up because it's going to take a different direction. If that
Okay.
makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. No, yeah. And like, and then of course you have to factor in POV. So
Yeah.
does the character point of view change, or location, does it change? Because a lot of the time, if you're writing a lot of these world travel books, like what I write is you're bouncing around locations a lot of the time. So a lot of that is the perfect place to end a scene is because you have travel involved.
Yeah.
Until I realized that I really like writing about Jack Riley sitting on a plane.
Well, it's a lot can happen there mentally, you know?
And that's I've talked about this ad nauseum, but that's also why my books are really freaking long now.
Yeah, I love your books. I'm a fan of your work. So
it's purposeful. It's purposeful. I did it on purpose. Oh, okay. I'll back up. I did it on accident, which became purpose.
gotcha.
Because when I was writing the Anubis Plague, I wrote out the whole first draft, and then Nick came in and interjected all of his creative juices into it to bulk up certain areas and be like, okay, let's do this, tighten this up, do this. That's what he's amazing at. I love to tell the story, and I'm like, it's done. He goes, you gonna edit it? I'm like, nope. That's your job. So I gave him a rough first draft because that was just what we were doing because that's the quickest
Give me a
way
word
to
count. What's a word count on that rough first draft?
the rough first draft. Well, the rough first draft included the long prologue. So the rough first draft was about 136,000 words.
Yeah, that's meaty. That's
Because
meaty.
it finished at like 126. So yeah. And so so the idea was I am going to give you the biggest, bulkiest, fattest, not necessarily sloppy, but just like information dump overload that I can give you. And then your job will be to cut it down and tighten it up.
Right.
Because that's what most authors do. Most authors cut down 10, 15, 20% of a book before release.
You're right.
He added to it.
Really?
He goes, I don't want to cut anything. And I'm like, what? And I'm like, really? He goes, I liked hearing about what Zara had for breakfast. He goes, because of where the setting is in the book, it's information as a reader I wasn't aware of. It's the culture. It's
right.
The area. It's the this. It's the that. There's scenes in the book that don't need to be there that do need to be there because that's the adventure. And I'm like, have I been going about this all wrong for the last 8 years? It's like, what am I like? So it was purposeful, but not from a storytelling aspect. It was purposeful because of an editing aspect, as far as like Nick and I, what we were going to do with the story. And when he came back as the reader at this point, he goes, I'm going to read through it and just obviously get the gist for the story, the character. I mean, we talked about it for months, but, and then he's like, there's a scuba diving scene in Levanzo, Italy, because that's where they crashed, basically. And it didn't have to be there. But I'm sitting here going, well, if she's stuck on this island, this little island off the coast of Sicily, and they need gas, and they can't get gas because it's this little island, and the only way they can get gas is they have to do a favor for somebody that is trading basically fuel. And I'm like, okay, well, what's in the area? So now I start Googling and searching Levanzo, and there's like a few famous shipwrecks. And I'm like, well, if this is a little town, what happens in little towns? Everybody knows each other, right?
Right.
So you can't do something without getting found.
Absolutely.
Exactly. So if you have a little bit of a gray market, black market undertaking that you need, what better way to do it than have an outsider do it for you?
Right.
So I'm like sitting here going, God, if I introduce this is going to be like a 4 or 5 chapter ad because it's a whole nother mission objective within. But I'm also thinking video games. I love side missions. So it's like I like the side missions in the Tomb Raider games. I like the side missions in a lot of these other games that have nothing to do with the story, but it just adds to the aura of the story. And so I wrote this scuba diving scene, and Nick's was like, it doesn't need to be there, but it's good and it's fun, and it just showcases Zara and her ability and the area. It showcases the stuff around this Levanzo Island, which is a real island. But I'm like, okay, so now I'm learning.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes sense.
And then Undying Kingdom started, Jack 4 started, and I went with the exact same approach with that story. And it became the longest book I've ever written. And it's the best rated book I have. So like as far as the Amazon ratings, which whatever, but I'm like, man, okay.
Tell me, Google. Now, wait, how old are you? Actually, how old are you?
I'm 38.
38. Okay, so I'm 52. So we didn't even start using really internet when I started writing. Like there was no real Google when I started writing, so research was pain in the ass.
Yeah.
Google has made that. Like I wrote the Temple of Shadow, which you read and did an endorsement blurb for, which is to me just cool as shit. But
I also did the art.
and that's right. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. And the book cover, designed the book cover because I wanted it to reflect your book covers, which are they're on my shelf as well. But never judge a book by its cover, right? But I do, and I think everybody does.
100% matters.
100%.
100%.
But writing a book without Google was work. Work. It's so cool now because you can do Google Maps and you could go, hey, right here, there's a Walmart by the, whatever. But then you can make your story. I used to get rejections for my short fiction. I wrote this story about this woman in labor, and the whole scene's about her giving birth, but she's giving birth to like a demon, right? And she's screaming like, get it out of me, get it out of me. And then when it's born, kill it, kill it. And a horror magazine rejected it and said, this didn't sound believable. Remember when your wife was in labor? Like, yeah, but she wasn't. I mean, she probably was giving birth to a demon, which is my oldest son. I'm just kidding, Phil. But I was like,
talk about airing out the laundry on air.
And he's a police dispatcher at 911 with me, so we're pretty tight. Yeah. We're pretty tight. But the part of this rejection that stuck with me was that fiction needs to be factual. But I feel like they missed the point of the story. But fiction needs to be factual. So I know you do, put a ton of research into things that may never even make it into the book, just so that I could have the setting and the culture correct.
Yeah, this is so funny. I sent a picture of, I had 3 tabs open on my computer yesterday, just trying to minimize the amount of windows and stuff. So I had 3, usually there's like 10, but I had 3 tabs open yesterday. One of them was Facebook because I was waiting to hear back from somebody. And the other 2 were current Venetian Pursuit, Jack Riley 5, as far as what I was currently working on. And it doesn't really give anything away, but one was North Sentinel Island in the Indian Ocean, which is the most dangerous place on Earth, basically. So much so that
why the animals, the
tribe that calls it home
Oh,
has never seen outside contact.
oh.
And when they do see outside contact, they slaughter you.
Hmm.
So much so that the Indian government has made it illegal to be within 2 miles of the island, under like federal law,
Wow.
because the people on the island are so dangerous that so like missionaries have gone over there to try and spread the word, and that's what they do. They literally, there's reports of them hitting the beach and then being ripped to shreds by the people. Like they don't.
Was there a horror movie about a tribe like that?
Oh, I'm sure. I'm not a I'm not a big
Or
maybe I'm not a big horror movie guy. So for me,
really?
it's
Oh,
no,
all right.
yeah, it's rompy adventures. It's fun. It's more
Okay.
lax and rompy and like it's. I like the aspects of some of the horror stuff, but unless it's a part of like a grander like thrilling story,
Yeah.
I'm not going to sit there and watch like a Saw movie and like that kind of crap. That's just I can't stand them. I don't get pleasure from being scared.
Okay.
Where my brother loves it. My brother loves horror movies and he loves like the trauma stuff, like the B stuff, like the
Oh
really
my God, the cheesier the better.
yeah. He loves that
Yeah.
stuff. He's got collections. He loves that kind of stuff, which
Yeah. Yeah.
he always has, but he has since like day one.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
grew up watching indie. So like for me it was the historical, this is cool. Like I liked The Relic when it came out,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
Preston and Child,
That was good.
but it had a lot of the historical aspect of it that I found interesting, and then it just so happened to be a sci-fi horror movie.
Right.
So it's like stuff like that I can get behind, but it's just not my thing. So it's like,
Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. We'll let it
yeah,
go.
yeah. Like I'll include like thrilling, suspenseful, like scary, whatever stuff into my novels, but it's purposeful depending on the location they're in.
Are you a librarian fan?
You know what? I started watching it when it first came out, and I haven't gotten back into it yet, and I need to.
I like
It
the movies. I like the
yeah
movies. The TV show was okay. It's
yeah.
good. But the movies with what's his name?
Oh, from he
Yeah.
was from ER.
Yep, he was from ER. He was one of the main doctors. Wiley?
Yeah, Wiley. Yeah.
Wiley.
No, he's a good actor. He's a good
Yeah.
actor. I need to get back into that because it's that thing. Like right now, I was actually really thrilled with is I watched the first Enola Holmes.
What?
Enola Holmes.
Oh yeah.
Uh,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, the second one just came out, so
Just
my
dropped.
wife and I I need to watch it. I was really happy with the first movie. Millie nailed the character like
So much fun.
so much. And honestly, whenever a character and a writer and a director is willing to break that fourth wall for humor,
Yeah.
it's when she turns to the camera and starts talking to you. I'm tickled as a writer. I just think I love doing that. Like that's a part of the Frank Moon thing that I love is that he's like, hang on a second, let me back up. I don't want to confuse you guys.
Right.
Like he understands that there's somebody reading a story about him, but it's not like a memoir. You know what I mean? It's he's in the moment and then he's like, oh man, this is really going to be stupid, isn't it? And he's like, who's he talking to? And I'm like, well, he's talking to the reader. So he's trying to make sure that the reader is like getting what, yeah. And I love doing that as a writer, but it's not, it's not always as an acceptable way of telling a
It doesn't
story.
come off always as perfect.
No, it's very specific. And that's why I like the Frank Moon series. It's the only series I write in first person perspective because there's something about writing like that feels off limits to my other books. So it's like when I break into that character, I get to use all of that like trapped, I guess, dialogue between me and the character.
Yeah. Yep.
So, but yeah. So, what were you saying about horror and stuff? You were about to say something, and then we.
It was just about. There was one just like about that island.
About the tribe.
A similar island.
Yeah. But I had that tab open, and then I had another tab open about what is it? Lake, like Nidos. It's Nyos. I may have butchered it, but anyways, it's a lake. It's a lake in Honduras, and back in the 80s. So it's called a lake. It's a crater lake. And back in the 80s, 1,700 people died overnight. 3,500 pieces of livestock died overnight.
Oh.
And basically the cholera shook, erupted something, and released a 62-mile-an-hour ball of CO2.
Oh,
And it covered 16 square miles of this lake and killed everything. So basically, what happened is it displaced all the oxygen and sent everyone into mass asphyxia and killed them. And I'm like, that's cool. I guess I'm a demented storyteller. So I'm like, but that was the two windows I had open. Oh, and then, oh no, there was another window. I'm sorry. So there was four windows, but the third window was a Jacob's ladder, the gym equipment, not the biblical
okay.
Jacob's ladder.
Oh, yeah.
And she goes, so you're talking about a ball of deadly gas. You're talking about a tribe of brutal people, and you're talking about a Jacob's ladder, like the gym equipment, all in the same scene. And I'm like, it's relevant. I'm like, but this is the stupid research rabbit hole that I can find myself in.
Yeah, yeah. That's
But that's Google. I mean, that's what we were talking about. That was Google. That was like, I can't find any of this information without like if I lose internet, I am so screwed. It's like,
yeah.
so Phil, as a writer, where does a lot of it come from as far as like like from influences? So it's like I always tell people I'm very visual. So for me, it's usually movies and video games because I process the information better because I always see me as a writer as more of a director. So like a storyteller who's writing. So like books, I love books. I love reading, but like visually, I just process it better because I can like see it in my head. And
Yeah.
then I can feel, oh, I can apply it like that. I can do it like that. In a story, it's just different because probably it's somebody else's words. So I think I take to movies and video games better. Like as far as like you're concerned as a writer, where does a lot of it come from for you as far as like the influences behind it all?
Oh, such a good question. I feel that a lot of my answer is very similar to yours. Maybe I'll watch a movie or a show or read a book and think, well, this is a good idea, but if it went in this direction, and then it's not so much that I'm taking the idea that I've just watched or read, as much as I'm taking a thought inspired from that and then mapping that out on my own. But a lot of the times, and more than not, I feel that it's not dreams, but something hits me, an idea hits me, and I can't pinpoint where those ideas will come from. But and then in minutes, I will have a concept of a beginning, middle, end of for a story, and I'll start taking notes. And when I start taking notes on just the basic, maybe it's 4 lines, then I start fleshing it out, and then it's a couple of pages, and then I'm starting new Word documents with character descriptions, and then I've got locations, and then it just steamrolls, it snowballs into something from nothing. From nothing. I can't pinpoint where most of my actual story ideas will come from.
Yeah, like for me, a classic one for me was when I decided to write The Undying Kingdom. I had always had like a want to write about Shangri-La because I just think it's fascinating and it's a beautiful landscape, and my stories are very settings based.
Right.
So it's like if I can't have a really cool, amazing setting, it makes it hard to write a rompy action adventure novel because that's what the genre is. I'm like, you need these awesome locations.
Right.
Yeah, it's just you can't do it. So when I was trying to decide what the 4th book of Jack has, because I have a bunch of stories that I could write as far as ideas, like what direction, and I also think where has he been in the world, where could he go in the world to kind of like spread it out. So I'm like going through doing artwork, book covers and stuff, and I see what ended up being the cover for Undying Kingdom. I see this gorgeous landscape of a Tibetan Buddhist complex, prayer complex. So all the gorgeous spires and like this.
Yep.
And I'm like, I need to write about Shangri-La finally. I'm going to write about Shangri-La. And then I'm like, okay, well, we're writing the Shangri-La story now. So it was just like,
Yeah.
and that was it. That was literally like, okay, we're doing it, and that was it. But
You
it was,
started with the location, and then from
yeah,
the location you developed the story.
yeah, basically. Like
Yeah.
like I'll see. So that's where a classic one I've mentioned on this show several times was when I wrote Berserk with David Wood in Dane Maddock Adventures. He wanted a story that was just obviously different than the ones that he had written, and I'm like, okay, that's so. I'm also thinking, where have I not placed a lot of characters yet?
Right.
And I'm like, man, I haven't really done anything like Scandinavia area, Northern Europe, like that gorgeous. And I'm like, so I'm inevitably searching through files to try and find artwork, and like I'm on Shutterstock, I'm on Deposit Photos, I'm on all these
Yep.
different websites, and I see a picture of an amazingly gorgeous, looks fake, fjord, and I'm like, wow, Norway. I'm like, I've never written about the Viking mythology and like Norse mythology. I'm like, so I text Dave and I'm like, we're going to do Norse mythology, not Mjolnir, like not like you're like, oh, it's Thor,
Yeah.
not like,
Yep.
which is still cool. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But I'm like, but we're going to write about Odin. And he's like, awesome, do it. I'm like, all right. It's like, so then I go down that Google research rabbit hole and start researching like Odin. And I'm like, I really want to write about the Berserker warriors. And I'm like, so I start, you just inevitably
Oh
start
yeah.
developing these stories. But it was like, I'm thinking, so it's always visual for me. It's that location. It's that gorgeous, that scenery. And I'm like, man, I could see my hero standing and see that massive, like that classic action hero shot, where, he's, you see him from the back and the camera comes out and you see this amazing landscape behind him just to show you how small he really is in the grand scheme of things. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I'm like, I love that. Like, you get chills just thinking about it, but
You do.
it's kind of cool.
You do.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love the whole Viking era. Yes.
Yeah. But as far as like, 'cause I know when we were talking off camera, you're like me, you're a big movie guy. So it's like, and I think it's true for most people where you get to a certain age and you just stop digesting newer content. You just keep reverting back to your older content.
Yes.
And yeah, and music and movies. It's not just like
Yes.
I have a lot of new albums, but they're usually from bands I've been listening to for 10, 15, 20 years.
Agreed.
So, yeah.
Agreed.
So like I watched I talk about it every show, but I just watched the Mummy 99 again. I've probably watched it 6 or 7 times in the last couple months. Because I'll be sitting at my desk and it'll be late and I'm not writing because I'm tired, but I'm still researching. I'm still doing other stuff. And I'll just blindly put movies on that I can more listen to than watch. And that's just one that's always in a rotation for me. The Indiana Jones movies, just National Treasures, just everything.
What do you? Okay, two things. So,
Sure.
I feel that The Mummy is as close to a Indiana Jones style film, and I'm a huge Indiana Jones, and I'm hoping that they do make the new movie. But what are your thoughts on the National Treasure TV series that's coming out?
I'm really excited. I'm excited for it because I understand like the reasoning behind it as far as like it's a recognizable franchise, so it's something. But I'm really excited for it because it's the same production teams. It's a lot of the people, Jerry Bruckheimer. It's a lot of those people.
Yep.
So as far as like the authenticity behind it, I'm kind of jazzed for it, and I like that they're bringing back like Justin Bartha. They're bringing back Harvey Keitel.
Yeah.
So they're bringing back some of the original, characters. And that it's going to be like a family story. It's going to be like, so it's supposed to be like her bloodline, like her family.
Right.
Would I rather have them made a National Treasure 3 10 years ago? Yeah.
Yeah.
But what this ended up doing, and Nicolas Cage resurrecting his career with his last few indie films that he's done, whether the reports are true or not, Bruckheimer and Nick are in contact about doing a third movie finally and putting a script together for it.
Oh, I didn't hear that.
Yeah, so it's also helped spur
Good
projects.
Oh, good.
Yeah, and that was Disney just again, these are reports, and I haven't
Yeah.
But
Confirmed.
there are reports that Disney is putting together or starting to look at putting together a Disney Plus series revolving around a younger Indiana Jones. Not young Indy,
Right.
not young Indy, not like high school teenage Indy.
Who
This
played young Indiana Jones? Wasn't that someone famous? Was that
uh
was that a Phoenix?
no, well, River Phoenix played young Indy just
Oh,
in The
in
Last
the movie.
Crusade. In The
Right.
Last
Right.
Crusade.
Yeah.
The actor from the TV series, I can't remember his name, but he did some work back in the '90s that was good.
Yeah.
I can't remember, but yeah, River Phoenix was young Indy just in The Last Crusade at
I
the
remember
beginning,
that. You're
at
right.
the prologue, the awesome prologue.
He was a good
He was
young.
good. He was very good. He was very good. Another tragic young death, but what they're thinking of doing was there's actually a big write up on it. Nerdist posted it actually. Nerdist posted it on their website. They posted the press release, I guess, and then their people kind of picked it apart and what if they did this? What if they did? It was I like their publication, but what they were saying is they would maybe go the route of the so 5 to 6 to 7 years before Raiders.
Oh,
So
so not a young teenager or a young.
this is like when he became a teacher,
Yeah.
when he became a professor, or like maybe when he's in the army, or like that style where because Young Indy wasn't really an action adventure series. It was more of like a historical franchise. Like he would meet people, like historical figures back in the 20s. I guess it would be late teens, early 20s, depending on his age. But this would be the classic Indiana Jones action series, but 8 to 10 episodes maybe, and then the entire series would be just one long storyline. Like one great MacGuffin that they would go after or do something. And I liked the idea because they're not technically recasting Harrison Ford, and I know that's like a big bugaboo with this franchise, and I get it. I mean, I write because of Indy. I mean that was like the beginning of it all for me. So I have a deep rooted love for that character. Like most writers in this roundabout genre do. But I liked the idea because you're not recasting Indy, you're casting a younger self.
Right.
And it's an origin, it's a prequel. But it would also revitalize the franchise and bring in a whole new viewership.
Absolutely.
And because if this is it and Indy 5 is the send off and then we never get it again, I am going to be heartbroken.
Well, I mean, you can't recast Harrison Ford.
No, it's probably.
I wouldn't watch Indiana Jones movie 6 without Harrison Ford.
And you know what? But people also said that about Sean Connery as James Bond, right?
But James Bond, they've changed constantly throughout the years.
Yeah.
You got used to that.
But the original was when they brought in Roger Moore.
Yeah.
And then you had Timothy Dalton for a couple. No, but the point is that, I hate this, I hate that. And the Roger Moore movies were massive successes.
I love Roger. I just did the James Bond. Sean Connery and Roger Moore are my two favorite. Daniel Craig took the movies to a different, more serious level, and I loved him too.
See, I'm 38, so I grew up with Pierce Brosnan. So
I like him. I like him.
I do. Oh, I like them all. Like my favorite movie growing up from them was Moonraker. Because
Moonraker's good.
It was the outer space stuff. It was just as campy as it got, but it was like
Jaws.
It was expected. I loved For Your Eyes Only when they're in Greece. I love that movie, and it's like, but a lot of them are the Roger Moore era, and it's like for whatever reason, I got nothing against, like, I love Sean Connery and everything, but it's like but Bond, it was like all the ones that I loved were always Roger Moore, it seemed like. And then Pierce, because GoldenEye, Tomorrow Never Dies, I mean, World Is Not Enough. I mean, I'm watching these movies and I'm like, he's also just so freaking lovable. He's just the personality that guy has is just everybody's. I don't know. I love it. Plus, the video game franchise was like, I mean, that's what created multiplayer. Like multiplayer shooters, like games like that didn't exist until like GoldenEye came out, and then you had your like Mario Karts and like that kind of stuff. Like,
Yep.
but you're sitting here going like, I can't remember a game console that I could sit with three different people, play on one screen, and you're like running around like, and it's also a shooter game. They just really didn't exist like a lot of those games did.
Right.
And you're just like, it created like a genre of gaming, and it's like you can't really go back any further than GoldenEye and find anything that was remotely as successful in that style. So it's like it's single. I don't want to say it didn't single-handedly create that, but it like, I guess, made it a possibility. And there was a lot of influence on that on the younger generation. So it's like, of course, the movies, there's like myself, like GoldenEye was massive for me and my friends, and then the movies were. So it's like there's a connection to it. It's not just, oh, these are cool. Like, I have a connection to Indiana Jones. I have a connection to that character, to that. So it's like, it's not just, oh, they're great movies. No, they mean more than that. That's like when you see somebody sitting in a movie theater watching a Star Wars movie and they're just freaking crying. And you're like, nothing's happened, but it's just the emotion. Like, I cried within the first 5 minutes of watching Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Because it was the first indie movie I'd ever seen in theaters.
Really?
Well, Last Crusade came out. Last Crusade came out in '89. I was 5.
Right. Oh my goodness.
So
I've seen them all in theaters. And the music always just.
So when you're in a movie theater and you've been growing up with these movies for 20 years at this point, and you're like, no, this is actually going to happen. Like, this is going to be like, I'm going to be in a movie theater hearing Raiders March. Like, I'm going to hear it.
Yeah.
And then you hear it, and then when him and Ray Winstone get thrown to the ground outside of Area 51.
Yep.
And he gets up and the camera pans back and all you see is the military truck and you just see his silhouette putting the hat on. I'm lost it. I freaking lost it because you hadn't seen Indy yet.
Right.
That was Indy's introduction.
It was great.
And then the camera pulls back and it's him and Ray and you see him in the full outfit and I'm just like, my mind is like, I'm watching an indie movie in theaters right now.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't care if this is good or not. Like, I don't care. Like, being able to see that character on the big screen was such a big deal for me. And it's like, that's why it's like I'm going to love the 5th movie. I don't care. He's 78. I don't care.
Agreed.
I'm going to love it.
Agreed. But that scene that you just described was so powerful.
Yeah.
It was. I'll never forget seeing that.
Yeah, and then that's like, so this is, I've talked about it. The behind the scenes stuff is what I love about movies. So like, I love watching the making of this stuff. So it's like when I'm sitting here watching the making of it and I'm hearing Spielberg talk about it, and he's just like, well, if you time lapse and you go Last Crusade, Kingdom, how many years have gone by? It was like 19 years. So what people don't realize, and they do now, but when people don't realize is during Raiders, Harrison Ford was already 39.
Right.
So he wasn't a kid.
No.
So people got to realize once Last Crusade came out, he was almost 50. And so you're sitting here going 19 years later. I mean, so when you're aging the character appropriately, I mean, you're sitting here going, I mean, he's in his 60s now, so late 60s at this point as the real character. Because if he was in his late 40s and then 89 to whenever Crystal Skull came out, I think that was like it was like a 19-year lapse. I mean, just do the math. And that's what he said. He goes, well, if it's 19 years later, what era are we in? We are now in the late 50s. And, well, the Nazis aren't the bad guys anymore. The Russians are. Because you're talking about the whole KGB and influence and whatever.
Cold
War. Yeah. And then they naturally chose the aliens thing, which I liked because there's parts of that movie that people didn't really pick up on. And it's kind of, so like when they talk about the Air Force incident in 47, unless people really like care about that stuff, they don't understand that is the Roswell incident of 1947.
Exactly. That
was the supposed crash that spurred all of this alien stuff. So like pop culture wise, that was a massive thing to include Indy in, because they even said you were a part of the excavation team, and it's like Indy was on the ground during the Roswell crash or aftermath. And I'm like,
Right.
that's freaking cool. It's
yeah.
like, that's cool. Like, that's amazing that and so like, I loved the idea of doing it because of like the historical significance behind it all.
Right. And it didn't get all supernatural.
No.
It didn't lose any, but all of the indies have been supernatural.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
But
absolutely.
I love that.
Yeah. And that's why it's like wherever and what was cool is that the fifth one's been done. So it's like wherever it's going, I like the fact that they've just haven't said a freaking word.
I don't want to know anything.
I don't want to know anything about it. I really don't.
I won't watch a trailer. I won't watch one trailer. I'm going to wait for it at the theaters, and I'm going to go in blind.
Yeah. I mean, I'll watch a trailer just because I can't help it.
Oh my goodness.
Well, so modern movie making, modern storytelling, I do love Marvel's the master at this, is they'll tell you everything without telling you anything.
Right.
So like the scenes that they're showing you in the trailer mean absolutely nothing.
Without context.
So it's like you're sitting here going, like, that's why like you see the Wakanda Forever trailer right now and it looks phenomenal. Like I liked Black Panther a lot.
Me too.
I didn't love it a lot.
Oh.
It was just, there were parts of it that I was like, okay, all right, like I liked it. And I love Martin Freeman, so anything he's in, I'm gonna watch. But yeah,
Hobbit.
Well, my hot take is that the Hobbit trilogy was better than the Lord of the Rings. So.
I agree too. I agree too.
Yeah, I think we've talked about that on Facebook, maybe.
Yeah.
But, and Martin Freeman just nailed it. He was the perfect Bilbo. He was amazing.
You watch Sherlock with him and Christian Cumberbatch?
No.
He's the best. Watson. Sherlock is phenomenal with Cumberbatch and Martin. They're great together.
Yeah.
Iconic together. Anyway,
I loved Downey and Jude. So Robert Downey and Jude Law together.
Oh yeah.
They're finally making a third movie now that Downey isn't connected with Marvel anymore.
That's it. It took that time to get it going. Those were two good movies.
Those were great movies. And I loved Jude Law as like more of the military badass, the Watson ex-army guy with the freaking sword in his cane. And I'm like, that's cool. Like I like the more theatrical, like big. So, but so like
you gotta watch Sherlock and let me know. Off screen, you watch Sherlock, you let me know.
No, I will. Yeah, and so, but with like the trailers and stuff, it's like Wakanda Forever in general. They're like, oh, sure, he's in the next one. You can see the suit. It's a woman. It's this. It's that. It's whatever. And then they tell you right off the bat, you know absolutely nothing. And I'm sitting here going, crap. I'm like, dang it. Now I really need to, so if they're telling you that, and there's been hints and inklings that Dr. Doom is the villain.
Oh, and I don't want to know.
No, but there's nothing in the trailer. There's no connection to an actor. There's nothing. Like, I've looked at IMDb. There's nothing there's absolutely nothing that tells you that. But there's these like rumblings going on the stuff that's actually happening in the movie that you have no idea about yet. And I'm sitting here going, because the trailer was very much Namor versus Wakanda.
Right.
And they're saying, well, what people don't realize is Namor's not a bad guy. Namor is like a Deadpool. He's an anti-hero. He's a hero that does anything possible to save his people and himself. Like, he has, like, his moral compass is not, oh, I can't kill this person because of this. No, he goes, I will kill this person if it saves my people. Like, he's the king. He's a king. He's a warrior too. So you're sitting here going, well, why are they fighting? So did something happen that maybe Wakanda was blamed for? So I'm sitting. So my brain is trying to pick the story apart, going, so what else is happening behind the scenes that we don't know about, that several people within the movie community, within the production, has said you know nothing. And I'm like,
I feel it.
But stuff like that. That's why I'll watch the indie trailer and go, because I know the significance of the movie, the importance of the movie, the meaning of the movie. They're not going to show me anything that matters. All I'm going to see is like the lighting. I want to see if the CGI looks hokey. I want to see like, and the fact that this is the first movie that Spielberg or Lucas have not been a part of.
Wait. I didn't know they weren't a part of it.
No, Spielberg denied directing it, so they have a different director,
Oh, I did not realize that.
which I'm actually very excited about because they
Because-
have a new, younger voice behind the lens, maybe
Which
a more modern voice. Because honestly, Spielberg. I mean, whatever, he's Spielberg,
right.
but he's Spielberg. We know what his movies are. We know what his movies like the setting. We know what like the feel, and I'm like, there's a different feel with like John Watts and Spider-Man, right? It's like
Yeah.
those movies feel different. James Gunn's movies feel different.
True.
Like there's
True.
there's something behind it that just feels different. And I'm like, wow, if they have a new and the director, I've looked him up. He's got some credentials, and I'm like, if this is going to be like a new like the new voice, I'm like, man, this movie could be epic. This movie could be monstrous because of you like when Jason Reitman took over for Ghostbusters Aftermath or Afterlife, and I thought it was one of the best movies I'd seen in years.
I knew it was going to be good,
was
but I was surprised by
Also,
how
a movie
great-
I cried several times in.
Great movie.
I cried several times in that movie.
Yeah.
I couldn't help it. Like I hear the music from Ghostbusters. I hear the ding 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 ding
Right.
ding, and I'm just like, oh, I'm like,
It is.
it hits.
Great job. Great film.
Amazing.
Great film.
But having somebody like that grew up with the movies, not regardless of Jason. I mean, Jason grew up on set with his dad, with Ivan and those guys. He goes, I grew like Bill and Dan, Ernie. I've known these guys for 40 years. Like
Right.
I grew up on set with them from a baby. So like this is like my home. Like but you can. So you're sitting here going, if this is a guy that, which I assume was a massive fan of these movies growing up, and now he gets to direct one, I can't imagine like that he's going to have the care, he's going to have like the authenticity behind it, but he's also going to have a new voice, a new influence. And I'm like, man, that could be magical. That could be amazing. And then if it goes nuts, Disney Plus series, maybe it's the same director, maybe it's the same
what I was
writer.
thinking.
That's why I'm like, man, this movie, just as far as like the community in the series, it might mean a lot. It might mean more than just Indy's send off or Harrison's send off. You know, it might be like the start of something new.
Bringing in all new people.
Yeah.
Well, now
yeah.
I'm going to have to. I'm going to have to look up. Now I have my homework. I'm going to have to look up the director and check out some of his stuff.
Yeah, it's a new team. So there's
Cool.
like some of the production people are the same people because it's all like ILM and it's like a lot of the Lucasfilms and that kind of stuff.
Right.
But it's not different writers, different director. So it's a new thing, and I'm like, ooh.
Did you ever read the Indiana Jones books?
I read. Yeah, I actually have. I read Army of the Dead. I actually have it. I actually have it next to me. I have.
Of course.
I have a few of the comic books that I bought years ago just because I found them on eBay and I thought they were cool.
Sure.
I have Indiana Jones. Are they accessible? I have Indiana Jones. I guess they're labeled as trading cards, baseball cards.
Oh.
I think they're right here. Hang on. Since we're talking about this.
All right, Matt. You go grab them.
Yeah, the 3-ring binder that they were in broke, so I put them in a packing envelope.
All right.
So this is gonna be super nerdy.
I love it. I'm loving it.
So there's Indiana Jones and the Iron Phoenix.
Yeah.
book.
Sweet.
Yeah. So I'm not on autofocus because it hates the map behind me.
Oh.
So my camera will not autofocus right now, and that's on purpose because it'll go all.
Yeah.
So it's Indiana Jones and the Iron Phoenix. Indiana Jones and the Iron Phoenix Part 2. Indiana Jones and the Iron Phoenix Part 3. Indiana Jones and the Iron Phoenix Part 4. And then you start getting into the trading cards. Oh, this
Phenomenal.
Can
I didn't know that was. I should have known that was a thing.
Okay, there we go. That's a little better. All right.
Oh,
So,
yeah, that's good.
so Indies.
Yeah.
Oh, there's Young Indy. See, there's River.
Yep.
And there's Young Indy from the TV series. There's Shy. So they have all like the main characters from the
Yep.
movies. There's Martin Brody. You start getting into like all of these guys, all the Nazis. There's the Russians.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, there's
Oh
Shorty.
man.
There's Sala, Willie. But then you start getting into concept art. So
Yeah.
like a lot of, and this is a lot of fan art too that they chose in a contest that they then put into trading cards.
That is so cool.
Yeah, and it's a massive set that I bought, and that is the original concept art for Indiana Jones that George Lucas put together.
Oh,
So it was very Mad Maxian.
yes. Yes,
Oh,
it is.
so it was
I
very
like
Mad.
it. I
There
like
it is.
it. A little darker.
Yeah, it's a little Mad Maxian. Sorry, the glare's terrible. And like I said, I'm not
Oh, but it's
autofocusing.
visible. It's visible.
Yeah. So, oh, there we go. That's a little better.
Yeah.
So yeah, I have these sets that I bought, and they well, I bought these like probably 10, 15 years ago. And then there's the art for all of the movie posters with no words on them. It's just the poster. So, but they're all the cards. And I mean, dude, these things go so deep. And then there's like, so scenes, specific scenes from the movies.
Uh-huh.
Again, not focusing.
Okay, yep. All right, I got it.
Yeah,
Yep.
and yeah, they're just literally Indiana Jones trading cards, and they're amazing. They're cool, and this is stuff that I could just literally sit here and just stare at, and just. I used to have all 4 movies on my back wall before I put my poster up, but I did a remodel in here because my kid started using my office as her classroom during shutdowns.
Yep.
But luckily, we never got shut down too hard down here. It was mostly just schools and stuff.
Yeah.
So I had her desk next to my desk, and she needed a wall for like numbers, letters, all that stuff.
Yep.
So I ended up taking down a lot of my decorations so she could put up stuff. And then when it was time for her to go back to school, I was like, do I want to put all of my posters back up, or do I want to just put up something like huge and massive? So I found this
I like the map.
gigantic laminated map on,
I like
on Amazon. And,
It's
here
also
we
a
are.
little more mature.
Eh,
A little more mature.
that's no fun.
I
It's no
know.
fun.
I got to be honest with you. So I'm like sitting here, right? We're doing this interview, and all I'm thinking is, you know what? I think I'm going to do an Indiana Jones binge watch with the rest of my day. Like I'm just going to go pop in Raiders of the Lost Ark and kick off my.
I'm sorry.
After-
You when you hear the score
Yeah.
in the opening number in Raiders, you're just like, they don't make them that good anymore.
They don't. No, that's one of my Pandora music channels. Is I can't think of the conductor's name now because I'm on the spot.
From Raiders?
Yeah,
Oh, John Williams.
yeah, John Williams. I've got John Williams, and he's done nothing but epic music.
Oh yeah.
I'll put that on when I'm writing. That's my writing music. Is John Williams. I put that on, not too loud, but it's always in the background whenever I'm writing, whatever I'm writing.
Yeah. So this is I had this conversation with RF Blackstone with Rich, and because him and I are simpatico with a lot of stuff, and he's the same way with music, with movie scores and stuff. Like he just has, he'll stop what he's doing, listen to it, and then play the movie in his head because it's just those iconic scores, and you hear them. And like for me, like I'll hear Pirates of the Caribbean score, and the dun, 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 and I'll just sit there and go, I wish I was a pirate. It's like, you're like, it makes you so happy. And you're just like, is there a more perfect score? And you're just like, so then I listed, like, we started talking like the 3 greatest movie scores ever. And he's just like, oh, you are going to get so much arguments from me, I think. And so we started talking about movie scores in general. And I'm like, to me, the pirate score is the top 3 score ever written. And it's more of like, the iconicness and the feeling behind it. Like some people love Jaws, and I'm like, Jaws is very iconic, but for me, it's not entertaining.
Right. It
know,
fits for the movie.
Yeah, exactly. It fits the movie.
It.
Yeah.
A lot of strings. It's very whimsical.
Yeah. So like for me, it was Raiders March.
Yeah.
It was Jurassic Park.
Yes.
And then it was Pirates of the Caribbean, Curse of the Black Pearls, that original score where they're on the ocean and you can just dun, 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 and you're just like, God, it was just
You feel it.
Yeah,
You feel it.
there's another one that I think you should check out if you haven't. And I told him to check it out, and then he literally messaged me an hour later, and he goes, "How have I not freaking heard this?" It is the scores for the Uncharted video games.
Which I'm not familiar with.
Okay, so Uncharted 4, it's the fourth game. It's called A Thief's End. What a lot of people don't realize is if you're familiar with contemporary composers and like big guys, it is composed by Henry Jackman. And Henry Jackman is who did a lot of Marvel movies. He did all the Captain America, Winter Soldier. He did like, if you look up Henry Jackman as on IMDb and look at his composing, and you're going, holy crap. Like this guy is like upper echelon S tier, massive composer.
Really?
And he was hired to compose the video game. And then you hear it and you're like, you're like, wow, this is just, action adventure at its best, because that's what it is. It's modern day Indiana Jones, and you hear it, and it's got all those great strings and the symphonies and the timbalas, or the drums.
Yep.
Yeah, and you're just like, you're sitting here going, and it's like the depth and like the pullback, and it's soft, and then it's huge, and you're just like, wow. And then I'm playing the game through the first time, and I'm like, the score, because I've always loved the scores, because all the games have amazing music, and like this, because it's that action adventure genre, so it's got that big bold music behind it than like the classic indie music. And then at the end, when it's doing like the credits at the end, and it says composed by Henry Jackman, and I'm like, what? I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? Because I love Captain America, the Winter Soldier. Like the music in that movie is so good, and it's his stuff. And I'm like, wow, he did the game. I'm like, that's like eye-opening that he's involved with this. But then you listen to it and you're like, oh, yeah, now it makes a lot of sense. But so Uncharted 4, A Thief's End, but it's like I think it's called like Nate's something. The character's Nathan Drake. But it's like the main composition, main score for that movie.
Did he do it for the movie?
I think he did the music for the movie.
I saw the movie. I can't remember the music.
Yeah, I loved the movie, but I'm also coming from like a super fan.
I liked the movie. I thought it was fun.
Yeah, it was very fun. Very fun. I loved it. If you're coming from a video game fandom, it was very different and very like interesting. Like, oh, they did it that way. Oh, they did it that way. But it was written by Neil Druckmann, who wrote all the video games. Okay. He is the guy who created Uncharted. Okay. And then he also wrote, it was him and one other guy that wrote the movie. I think it was actually the two writers of the video games that wrote the movie. So I'm like, if they're involved, I'm going to love it, because their franchise, Naughty Dog, who they run, is kind of the biggest gaming franchise around right now.
I know Naughty Dog. Naughty Dog.
They did The Last of Us, which is now going to be an HBO series, which The Last of Us, both games won Game of the Year. All 4 Uncharted games won Game of the Year.
My kids and I can't wait for the show to, I think, what's it come out in January? Yeah.
January 15th, I think. Yeah, and he also, Naughty Dog also gave us Crash Bandicoot.
That's my game. Now that's my jam. Like if we're talking video games, because I want to be good at all the other games, but I'm this guy who spins in a circle, and they say, jump into the helicopter. I don't know how to get to the helicopter. Crash Bandicoot.
Yeah. So in parts of Uncharted 4, you actually, in the game, you actually sit down and power up a PlayStation and play Crash Bandicoot.
Oh my God, that's so cool.
In the game.
Talk about a compliment.
You literally go up and you turn on the PlayStation console, the old gray console with the flip up on the top.
Oh, yeah.
And it goes, and you see the old PlayStation logo, PlayStation. And then, you know, yeah. Oh, yeah, no. And then you actually play a level of Crash Bandicoot in Uncharted 4. And it's the original Crash Bandicoot graphics. It's that original, now crappy graphics. And it's like, but Uncharted 4 is one of the most beautiful games you'll ever play because of, like, just, you could watch all the cutscene movies, and I do that. I've actually watched on YouTube, you go Uncharted cutscenes.
Yep.
And I've watched, so there's 5 games really. There's a 5th game called The Lost Legacy, which is a couple of B characters from the series. And I've watched all 5 cutscene movies so they're like probably about 2 to 3 hours a piece. It's just the cinematics. And so you just watch him as movies.
Yeah.
And I've probably watched all 5 of those probably about 10 or 11 times. Like I'll watch them back to back to back to back while I'm working, and just because content wise, it doesn't get better than that for me.
So I've heard.
So I'll watch that and I'll be like,
I got a guy at work that does the exact same thing. Just
Yep.
pulls it up on YouTube and he just watches that all night long.
Yeah, just the cinematic cutscenes.
Yeah.
And I mean,
Yeah.
nowadays they're as good as any movie. So it's
That's
just
what I hear.
creative wise. So it's like they're amazing. They're amazing. But so not that I'm worried. I know it's just 2 guys talking about anything, and
I love that.
I love it. No, yeah, no, I love it. I absolutely love it. But I am. This is always a topic as being writers, because it seems like a simple concept, but it's never a simple concept. So how, realistically, how different could one person's writing process be from another person's? Because you're sitting here going, it's a Word doc, it's research, it's a book. It's like the concept behind it's fairly simple. But from like start to finish, everyone I've talked to, it's not even been close. Everybody's massively different with what they do. And it all starts from, in my case, is whether to outline or not to outline. And if you do, how dense do you go? Because I'm fluid. I'm outlining, but I'm not outlining too far ahead. And then I have friends that quite literally outline every chapter and they don't deviate. Which for me, it's I just don't do it. I don't do it. And they're great authors. And like Andrew Clausen outlines a lot. David Wood, I know, outlines a ton. Ernie outlines a decent amount. He doesn't outline as much. He's more like me, where he'll outline 4 or 5 chapters ahead just to kind of get a feel, and then just write, and then let the story take you. And that's how I write.
Yeah.
But so like when you get an idea for a story, specifically your fiction stuff, obviously, because your nonfiction stuff, it's a completely different ballgame.
Yeah.
So for your fiction stories, like Temple of Shadow, for instance, it doesn't have to be that book, but I know that was a more
good
recent
one to go with.
Yeah. When you get the idea and you see something, like when we were talking, I see something and I'm like, oh, I wonder if I could write about that. And it's just a visual picture. When you see something and you kind of have an idea for a story and you're like, oh, maybe this will work. Like, where does it develop from there? Like, what does it kind of look like when you kind of sit, and obviously the Google rabbit hole, Google Earth, all that stuff. But at the same time, it's like, where does it kind of go from there for you?
Okay. Yeah. After I do the ton of, so I'm going to go real. I use Google Docs. So I will start with a folder with a potential working title. And from there, I open up and create different things, and I will do research on an area. Like if I'm like, oh, okay, and I do character developments, I definitely develop my characters. Every character gets at least 2 full pages. Where they went to high school, what food they like, what food they don't like, if they have allergies, if they don't like their mom, even if that doesn't get used. And then as I start developing the actual story,
well, it develops their personality regardless if you use the information or not.
Right, it gives them their personality.
Yeah, it gives it. Yeah.
So, like I said, I will have an idea for a story, beginning, middle, end, and it's a couple of lines. So I know where I want to start and I know where I want to get. And then as far as outline, it's minimal. I will say, okay, we need to stop here. This needs to happen. This needs to happen. This needs to happen. But then I really let the characters take over. I let them kind of direct where the story's going to go. And sometimes they write me into a hole and I realize, well, how did I get here? And it makes sense, but now how do we get out? And so then I take a break from writing, and I don't want to say like I'm a method actor. I'm a method writer, where they get in my head and they will help me work out the scene to figure out what's going to go on next. And if it makes sense, I go with it. And if it doesn't, we'll have, sounds so crazy, but we'll have like, oh, that's not going to work. Well, how about this? Well, how about this? And so I'll be at work or I'll be driving, and there's constant conversations taking place for me to get where I need to go with the characters to make sure everybody's happy with where the story goes.
Yeah, and but see, in your case and in my case too, is that's what helps keep the story more realistic, is because your characters can only do so much based on their background, based on their training, based on their situational awareness. Maybe they're a bookworm and they're not used to being out in the world, so it's
Right.
like, so, but the way they would dig themselves out of a situation would be unique to their ability.
It has to make sense.
It has to make sense. Yeah. I mean,
Right.
yeah, you can fiction, I mean, you can fancify it and you can make it, something happens that's just force majeure and you're just like, oh, it's just luck or it's not, or it's just,
If
something happen. You can, but you can make it work doing it that way too.
you can.
You can. But at the same time, it's like, where are you going? How do you get there without it like, so it's like you have your story and then you have that one scene that's like, huh? Because it doesn't fit the fluidity of everything else.
Right. You want your character to draw on their skill or even their phobias
Mm-hmm.
and overcome a phobia to get past the point,
Yep.
or utilize a skill they have or a skill they've been working on to get them out,
Yeah.
as opposed to some random thing happening that helps them. You want the characters to work it out.
Yeah.
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 No, and I 100% agree. 100% get it. I mean, that's why, like we'll call it the more over the top, like Matthew Riley, for instance, Jack West Jr. Love the series. Has a very more over the top, like holy cow, massive, like there's some supernatural elements in it, and there's less grounding involved in some of the stories, but from day one, it's been that way.
True.
So it's expected, and the universe is built that way.
True.
Where like I specifically decided to make it incredibly hard on myself with Jack because I was not going to introduce supernatural elements ever. And the idea was, if this is possible in real life, if any of this is possible in real life, and if any of this exists in real life, how is it going to be,
Right.
found or finished or whatever? So it's like when he gets himself into a situation or a situation just finds himself or finds him, how is he going to get out of it like a average normal human being would be?
Using his tool belt,
Yeah.
using the tools from his belt that he's acquired
Yeah.
throughout the books. So it makes
and like things can happen. Like I've never used it, but I'm just thinking off the top of my head where, if somebody's pointing a gun at somebody and then all of a sudden maybe there's an earthquake or maybe there's something throws off the aim of the gun and then that's how the hero escapes. Like something as hokey and as rompy as that, but at the same time you're sitting here going, well, what atmosphere are they in? Are they on a volcanic island maybe? Are they here? Are they there? And you're sitting here going, or if they're on a boat, does it just a big wave hit and jostles the boat around? Yeah.
Right.
And you're sitting here going, well, yeah, that could absolutely happen. Okay.
Right.
I'm like, but that's a realistic situational outcome at this point, because it's not just, he forces the guy to do something with these telepathic powers and blah, blah. I'm like, well, then how did he get in the situation in the first place if he's so all powerful?
Exactly.
Yeah. So exactly. So, I mean, but like, I know you've done like fantasy stuff, but it's like, it's different where
magic.
Yeah. But the world revolves. There's magic involved. It's like, it doesn't just pop up. It's like, but from day one, that magic has been there and or it's been a part of the theme of the story and it's accessible
But with magic and with fantasy, there also has to still be rules.
Yes.
Which is very tough. Very tough.
Yeah. Like a Harry Potter, it's all vocal. Like
it's all vocal, right?
Yeah, it's all vocal. They're casting spells, and some of those spells, like we've seen in the original Harry Potter movies, Ron and them, they can't pronounce anything half right, so the spells come out weird.
Right.
Wingardium Leviosa, which I just...
That was good. No,
but not Leviosa, Leviosa. It's like, but she's accentuating how the pronunciation of those spells is key.
Right.
But there's a theme with that throughout the series, and I'm not a huge Harry Potter person, but it's like I understand like the writing behind it, and like they're very very direct with that from the get go that your pronunciation of these spells is very very important.
Throughout
And
every
then
movie.
throughout every movie it is, and a spell won't work because they don't pronounce it correctly. So you know that from the get go that is a bugaboo.
Right. Right.
So, but yeah, like so with these stories, making them uber realistic, it definitely for me it definitely makes me super creative or have to
Yeah.
be super creative
Yeah.
because
It's fun. That's what
it
makes
is.
it fun.
It's
For
fun.
me, that's what makes it fun.
Yeah.
You know, coming
No.
up with working out these puzzles
Hmm.
that I put together, that I got the pieces for, but they got to
Yeah.
fit. They got to
So
fit.
you're probably the same as me, where you'll have like so depending on your setting, you'll have a scene that you don't care how it happens, but you're including it in the book. Like there's like a specific scene in your head where it goes, "This is happening regardless if it makes sense." So I need to write the story around us that like,
Sure. Sure.
or maybe this act around a specific scene because it's just going to be bonkers. It's going to be amazing
All the time. That's
all the time.
that's
Yeah.
that's a that's also the fun of it, you know, because we create this whole world in this, you know, 400-page book or 300-page book, where if we don't put the fun into it, the scenes that we want into it, what's the point? You know, what's
It's
the point?
it's
Gotta
also incredibly. It's also very noticeable. It's like you you know, and like when I talked with Andrew said the same thing. He was complimenting me on my work, and he goes, when I first read The Forgotten Fortune, he goes, it was the first book of yours that I had ever read, and he goes, when I first read it, I knew without a shadow of a doubt that you loved writing it, and he goes, I knew you were a fan of the genre as much as you like writing the genre. And I said, no, and thank you. And I said, I hope that comes out, but that is a purposeful way of writing is, you know, you putting that, I wanted to write parts of that book regardless of what. And I wanted to make it work.
Yeah.
And so I obviously went out of my way to the 10th degree to make sure it happened.
Right.
And but that's an example. That's just an example of it where it's like there's scenes that I didn't write in certain books because I honestly just couldn't make them work.
Yeah.
And it
Oh,
sucked. But that doesn't mean I didn't use them somewhere else. Or at least the situation.
You always save that file for later. Save that file for later.
Yeah, because the situation can be the same. It just might be a different villain. It might be a different relic or setting. But the situation, like another tangent from Raiders, is when Marion and Belloc are in the tent together and they're doing the drinking game.
Yeah.
And she's drinking him under the table.
Yeah.
And you have, what the heck's his name? He's got a weird name. The German that wears all black, the interrogator. He walks in and he's
creepy.
Oh, yeah, creepy guy. Yeah. And he pulls the thing of death out of his coat and the chain, and he whips it like this, and then it magically turns into a coat hanger.
Yep,
right?
he hangs his jacket up.
Spielberg tried to work that into 2 other movies before it made it into Raiders.
Oh, fit perfect there.
But
She's getting all scared.
But the bit was an idea that Steven had from years before that he just never got to use. And then when he found a way to use it, he goes, this is going to be perfect. And it was amazing. It was an amazing scene. But it's the same thing. It's like these scenes that we write that we have in our back pocket. It's like, we'll make them. We'll find a way to make it work.
It's gonna fit square peg round hole one way or another eventually.
Eventually, you trim it to make it fit into that round hole. You'll figure it out.
Figure it out.
No, you will. You absolutely will. So just like as we start to wrap things up here, just because we will get into another long conversation. I know it with this next. If somebody is interested in your books and they want to find out who you are and just kind of through your books, obviously, give us a book or two that you could recommend to the reader that would kind of showcase your work.
As it is, when we took a little break a little bit earlier, I did grab Temple of Shadows. So if you're a fan of maths, I'd like to think that my book is mildly in the same vein as his adventure books, and you'll see that he designed this cover. Yeah, there we go.
Yep.
He designed that cover and provided a nice endorsement blurb for it, and it's an action adventure.
Yep.
It's a book I definitely love. It's a book I was going to do a full series on with the characters, which I may still go back to, but at this point, I'm not positive. But then I feel that Sounds of Silence is one of my more important stories about this 12-year-old boy, I mentioned it earlier, who contracts meningitis and becomes deaf and doesn't have to, but he goes to a school for the deaf and has to learn sign language. And the biggest thing is he believes that his dreams of becoming a professional baseball player are now shattered because of his deafness. And writing this book, we talked research. I spent a couple weeks at a Rochester School for the Deaf. RIT, Rochester Institute of Technology, is a college in our area with the largest deaf population because they have the NTID aspect of the school. Bill Cosby, probably a taboo thing, but in his show, the Cosby Show used to wear an RIT sweater all the time.
Oh, okay.
It's one of Rochester, New York actually has one of the largest deaf populations outside of Washington. So I've taken years of sign language and instruction because of this writing this book. So it's a really heartfelt story. It's a really impacting story. It doesn't necessarily reflect me as my writing over the 30 books that I've written, but it's some of my more personal, more intricate writings. So Sounds of Silence, and then obviously Something Good Happens After Midnight is my most raw and open and honest writings. I guess, I don't know. You know, if you're going to look me up, you find
that's the thing. That's when we were saying at the top of the show is you're not afraid to cross genres. It's like I have a very specific thing that I do. And so, like, for me, when somebody asks me, the answer is really easy. So it just because it's like, well, what's going to showcase my action adventure books?
True.
And so, like, but that's just my philosophy. So it's like I hold true or try to hold true to a specific style and genre. But I break it with my Frank Moon series, which I will be extending finally. I'll be working on again.
Good deal.
Yeah, that was a quick funny story is before I started working with Nick, when we first started deciding to write together, before Conundrum, before all that stuff, he had started Conundrum and he was looking for content. And his background is marketing. Like he's very good with SEO manipulation, algorithms, all that stuff. So he knows how to get stuff in front of people. And I'm terrible at it. So I'm like, well, I have this great Dead Moon series that is all highly rated, but didn't necessarily sell all that well. And because it is not action adventure, it's action horror. So it's not a genre that most of my readers are expecting of me. Which is, I guess, a curse of pigeonholing yourself into one genre. But potentially. So I said, I'll be more than willing to pull this down from Amazon because it was all self-published, so I had full control, and give it to you if you're willing to republish it and market it. And he's like, send me the first book. I'm like, all right. So I sent him the first book, Nightmares Are Born, which was the fourth book I ever wrote. So it was early, and gave it to him. And, we work. So I hadn't talked to him in a few days. It was about 6-7 days. And I messaged him and was like, hey, did you ever get around to reading the first Dead Moon book? He goes, I just finished book 4.
You read all 4?
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
He went and got the other ones on Kindle Unlimited and read them on his own. He never told me. He goes, I just want to let me see the first book. I'll go through it and see if it's something that I think I can market and publish. And he goes, we're not really like Conundrum. We aren't really trying to do a lot of horror. We're trying to do more like traditional thrillers, or at least stuff that have like a lot. But he goes, the difference is I read all 4 of these books. I don't read horror. I don't like horror. These don't read like a horror novel. He goes, they are action thrillers that happen to have monsters, that happen to have horror elements. He goes, so I had to know, I had to see the characters, I had to see what happened next, and I love them. He goes, I think they're freaking great. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Because I was just like, so, but he even said, there, we just, so it's all a marketing thing. He goes, how are you going to market it? And I'm like, it's what we need to talk about. So
Right.
then he sent me a publishing contract, and the next, so Dead Moon is now called The Unseen, which is what the creatures are called in the book. And the first book, Origin, which is new name as well, is going to be republished in 6 days on the 15th.
Nice.
And then the other three books in the series will get republished every month until then, until they're done. And then the fifth book in the series I'll write probably like summer of next year. But he goes, I need a new book in the series too. And I'm like, if you're confident in them, I've been dying to continue this series. I just need like a reason to, I guess. And if I have your backing and I have like maybe some new life, some new creative life as well, just as a couple of years have gone by, I'll be more than willing to write it. And I was thrilled to hear that, and I was like, wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And a lot of it's the marketing aspect of it. It truly is.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
so maybe a book from someone else. Maybe what would you recommend from somebody that maybe it was years ago that was an inspiring read from when you were younger, or even more recently?
Well, I have to go back to where this whole interview started with S.E. Hinton,
Mhm.
because The Outsiders, without having read The Outsiders, I wouldn't be where I am in any aspect of my life. To say that one book changed me as much as that book did, and it's still, I believe, required reading in high schools and stuff, but that 130-page novel about these kids turned me into a reader, helped me become a writer, and I don't think without S.E. Hinton's writing, I could have accomplished most of what I've accomplished in the years since reading it back in seventh grade. So,
Yeah.
if you haven't read The Outsiders as an adult, and you've only seen the movie, I would still recommend reading
Yeah.
The Outsiders, definitely.
Yeah, no, I remember reading it in school, and then obviously the movie. I mean, it had an all-star cast, and that was
Yeah.
a wonderful cast. I mean, it was really well made too. It wasn't as it was a pretty grounded story as far as like.
Was this Scorsese?
Good question. I don't know.
I don't know, but I feel like it was a Martin Scorsese film.
It could have been. It could have been. Yeah, but
Wrong.
I mean,
It's good wrong.
you had. I mean, your Patrick Swayze's, your Matt Dillon's, Ralph Macchio, Rob Lowe,
C. Thomas Howell,
C. Thomas Howell. Yeah, no, Tom Cruise.
Tom Cruise.
There's always one that I forget.
I know who it is. It's the one who's got the brother, but they have different names from two.
Oh, Emilio Estevez.
Emilio Estevez.
Yeah, Charlie Sheen and Emilio Estevez. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah. Now and then you of course fast forward, I don't know, 5-10 years later, and all of them are A-listers.
All of them.
Pretty much. And you're like, wow. And like and most of those actors, that was one of their first movies.
That's right.
They were all very new into Hollywood.
Breakout film.
Yeah, I believe it would have been what? Swayze may have been the only like semi-known name. Now that I'm thinking about it, because even Matt Dillon wasn't doing anything yet. I don't think. And I know the kids like Ralph Macchio. That was pre Karate Kid.
Oh yeah, Karate Kid came a year later.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, there's a ton of actors in that movie where you're just like, wow. And now they're all like generational legendary actors. But so like for me, in kind of like the same aspect, the book that I would recommend, because I always recommend my Jack Riley stuff, so I'll skip over that. I mean, it is actually what I would do is when this comes out, the Unseen Origin will be out. So if y'all want to check that out, I really think you'll dig Frank if you aren't familiar with the Dead Moon series. I really think you guys would dig that story. It's as close to a love story as I've ever written, but there's lots of blood. So,
Which all love stories have.
yeah, right. So, but the idea behind that book was originally it was a one-off. It was just standalone. But I fell in love with Frank and Jill, Frank and Jillian Moon. And what happened is there's a monster apocalypse that takes place in New York City, and he is a NYPD detective, and she works for like a powerhouse law firm, and their marriage is as close to over as possible. And they're both stressed out from work. He's working all the time. He sees death on a daily basis. She is a woman in a very, very heavily masculine world that becomes a peacock because that's what's required of her to stand out and to succeed. And Frank is very laid back, lax, just wants to relax and have fun. And she sees him as lazy, and he sees her as uptight and overbearing. And it's just the last 10 years since they moved to New York 10 years prior. And ever since their careers had ballooned, they basically lost their marriage in the process because of just time and tired irritation, and then took it out on each other. And so the idea behind the story is to have the worst possible thing happen to bring them back together. And in this case, what ends up being more of a radioactive meteor lands in Central Park and emits this radiation that affects about half the population in New York City and changes these things into monsters, which I dub the unseen, because they witness it come in, it lets off this massive red cloud of radiation, and then they dig their own eyes out.
Oh.
As they turn into like these gangly, like goblin looking kind of things. So Frank, and remember the entire story is first person present. So you are in the head of Frank as he's experiencing all of this.
I like that.
And he goes, "What in the bleep is going on? Holy," and it's squirrel. It's like, "Oh my God, what the," and because it's like you're in this and you're like, everything happens all at once and he's just reacting to it. So he doesn't have time to think. He doesn't have time to plan. He doesn't have time to, so the idea is that he has to so if you're familiar with New York City, which I am now, it's not big. And he is in the eastern edge of the island, and she is at a gala at the museum, the National Museum of History, and on the other side of Central Park. And you're sitting here going, well, the island's only about 3 miles wide. And he has to get from point A to point B during a monster apocalypse. Well, it's 3 miles. How hard could it be? Well, if anybody has seen any doomsday movies before, cars are a no-go. When half the population is trying to kill you, and you're talking millions, and you have another half the population who's just blindly freaking out, it takes a while. And, so there's like EMP stuff. So like the power goes out, it's just blacked out. It's chaos. And so you are along for the ride for Frank to try and find his wife. He knows where she is. He has no idea if she's alive, has no contact, has nothing. He's just hoping that she has survived. And what it was when all of this happened and she calls him crying before all the signal and power and everything fails. The only thing Frank can think about is saving the woman that he loves. So it went from, I hate you, I can't wait for this to be over, to, oh my God, I need you, please come find me.
Right.
And the entire story is Frank realizing how much he misses her and how much he needs her. And it's like this, like I said, it's as close to a love story as I've ever written. But it's
romantic.
It is. It's coming from what a life or death situation can really do and what it can prove. And it's not that they were broken. They needed a little bit of reason to work at it.
A push.
They needed a push, and the push was just utter chaos.
Right.
So, like I said, the first book in that series comes back out on the 15th. New cover art. David Behrens did the cover for it. He's amazing. He does more of like the cinematic, like apocalyptic covers.
Cool.
He's really good at it. So we hired him to do it. His vision is just a lot different than mine when it comes to certain things. He's very good with like people on the covers and like the I've posted it. It's a gorgeous cover. And as far as other author, kind of same situation with you is I just wasn't a reader growing up. It wasn't any kind of like disorder or anything. It was just I just didn't read, and mostly because I to this day can't stand classic literature. Just can't stand it. Can't stand it.
All right. I can't. I generally can't.
Yeah,
I've tried. I've read a lot of them
yeah, I can't.
as an adult.
I can't stand it. And of course, the required reading in school is like classic literature. And I get it because the story and the meaning behind the books is what the teachers are trying to get across.
Sure.
So it's, I understand it, but as a kid, nauseating. It's just, ugh. So, but this was the thing is in 11th grade, my English teacher knew that I loved movies, knew that I loved stories, and knew that I would read if I was given a reason to read. So
Okay.
Miss Inglis, my English teacher, that's why I remember her name, Miss Inglis, she presented me with an extra credit assignment to get my grade from a B to an A because I was on the cusp. And because I did great in class, I liked the idea, the stories, writing, like I liked that stuff. I just didn't like the required reading. And I had a mind, so I could like remember answers and then just ace the test. It was like,
I wish.
yeah. But so she presented with me a beat to death paperback copy of Meg by Steve Alton, which is now a monster blockbuster series.
Yep.
And this would have been back in 2001 or 2002. So the book had come out in 99. So it was a relatively new book. And I read the back cover and I'm like, 70-foot prehistoric great white terrorizes Pacific coastal communities. And I'm like, that might be kind of cool. And then, I'm reading it and flipping through it. I read the entire book in 3 days, which my mom was crying because all she saw was me reading. She was just like, oh my God. Because she knew I loved comic books. I loved stories. I loved movies. It was just, I didn't like to read books because it was just, I hadn't found what I liked.
Right.
And then I did, she goes, I need a front to back synopsis of the book for your presentation for your end of year extra credits. Because she gave the book to a lot of kids for an extra credit assignment. And I did 2.5 pages front to back because it was just, there was so much going on in my head and so much I loved. And she was just like, Matt, she goes, check out his other books then. So then I checked out Steve's other books and I read all of his early work, all the Meg books. I read all the Domain books. I read all his early stuff. The Lock was amazing. And then met him at a book signing down here because he lives in South Florida. Had him sign one of my books, which was kind of cool, especially I think I was 20 at the time when I met him.
That's cool.
Yeah, so that was cool. And then because of Meg and because of just that one book, it really opened my eyes to what else is out there as far as just stories in general. So it opened me up to finding guys like Jeremy Robinson, who I ended up doing ARC and beta reading for a couple of years before I started writing. So, then I just met a lot of other people in the industry and found other books. That's how I found Matthew Riley was through Jeremy because it came up on my Amazon. You might like this page. And I was like, oh, 7 ancient wonders, 7 deadly wonders, depending on what country you're in. Wow, that sounds cool. I love history. And then I read what it was about. I'm like, oh, this is going to be badass. And then can't tell you how many times I've read that. So it's like, but the one book can really kind of unlock something, and I think some people might just be looking for that one book.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that would be my recommendation for the same reason of kind of yours is it kind of finally resonated and opened your eyes to this world, to the possibility, I guess.
Yeah.
But so if anyone has any questions, if anybody has any information they need from you, just as far as your work, as far as if they have a question about your work, where can we find you?
So, unfortunately, I let my website expire a few years back, and I've just been using my Facebook page, my author Facebook page. So it's just all one word, author Philip Tomasso. Facebook/author Philip Tomasso.
Okay. Yeah. I'm all over social media, so I get it. It's quick, it's easy, like I have an email, matt@mattjamesauthor.com, but nobody uses it. It's usually just business stuff. It's
Yeah.
for whatever programs I have to re-up on a subscription or something like that. But Facebook Messenger is always the easiest for me too.
I'm very responsive.
Yeah.
Within an hour to 2 hours.
Yeah, same.
I
So
don't
I mean,
I don't
oh, that's
sit-
cool. Yeah, because I've had other guests that have been on, have somebody message them out of the blue about something they said on the show, and they were just curious. So I was like, oh, okay. I mean, that's what this is about. Is I want the listeners and the watchers, the viewers, to kind of get a little bit more of the background scoop on some of the talent that's out there and the creative talent that's out there, because the books aren't just, it's not the classic group of monkeys with a typewriter. It's a very specific human being that's putting these stories together, and that's why we have blockbuster movies, and that's why we have flops. Is because
It's
they didn't
true.
they didn't they didn't work with one another well. It wasn't necessarily the director's fault. It wasn't necessarily the writer's fault. It was just the two of them didn't
match.
they didn't match.
Yeah.
So it's like some of these stories, they're very specific people behind them that bring them to life, and some just resonate better with others. And it's nice to be able to put a personality together with a name, not just the face with the name, but the actual like personality of the author, of the writer.
Agreed.
So, but yeah, I mean, if y'all love the show, please subscribe, please like it, share it. Can find me all over the place. I'm facebook.com/MattJamesAuthor, MattJamesAuthor.com. I have a Twitter that I'm starting to use again because Twitter's cool again. So it's @MattJamesAuthor. I'm on Instagram. I'm on everything under the moon. And if you are an aspiring author, please contact us at conundrumpub.com. There is a submissions page. So if you are unfamiliar with self-publishing, or if you just need help with publishing and marketing, if it's something that we are interested in, we are definitely taking open submissions. So we will read through the manuscript and see if it's something that is interested, or that we would be interested in publishing, even if it is prior work that is already published that you have full creative control over. So it has to be something that either you have the rights to. If it's something that we think we can do something better with as far as publishing, we are, like I'm doing with my Unseen series, my Dead Moon series. I'm pulling those down. They've already been pulled down from Amazon, and I'm republishing them with new life, new editing, new everything. So we're more than willing to do that. We are more looking for original work, but if it's something that is a published work that we think we can do something cool with, then you never know.
Cool.
But it's something that if anybody watching this has some stories that need some help, we're willing to give it a try. So no money out of pocket to you guys. We're just taking it for publishing royalties and that kind of stuff. There's nothing that's going to give you any headache as far as cost. So we do the covers, we do all the marketing. So yeah, but so thanks for everyone for watching. Thanks everyone for listening. We'll have Phil back on at a later time, I'm sure, when we have more to talk about. Believe me. But thanks, my friend, for coming on. Great to finally talk.
I had a great time. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.